assignment, so no worries there. What I will do is I want to just go through the last question pertaining to, in your assignment, pertaining to the Keynesian model. So I sort of just wanted to give you some insights here. All right, so obviously we have looked at the Keynesian model in our last lecture. So that is where we have those complicated formulae starting to come in. I know you'll obviously remember that we start with the very basic one, that this is the equilibrium that we seek, where aggregate demand equals aggregate income. Okay, obviously that very rarely happens in our economy. We also do have the other formula that is specifically for consumption. So let's just give us an overview of what is included in aggregate demand. So in this example, we've specifically been told that there is no government, no foreign sector. So here we know that in this entire economy, there only exists these three types of consumption. Okay, so we have consumption. This is done by consumers. Then we have, of course, investments, which are done by firms. And then we have government. Okay, so government spending. Now, in our simple economy, we have been told to ignore government spending. So we've already been told that we can focus in on just these two factors that contribute to your Keynesian model. Okay, so when we're looking at consumption, we know that consumption, so for now, we're also going to just ignore investments, and we're going to look at the first function that they've given us, which is the consumption function. Okay, so we know that consumption equals, so we're just going to write this formula out into words that are easier for us to understand. Okay. So we know that consumption consists of autonomous consumption. No problem, Nicole. I'm glad you're here. If you have any questions relating to the assignment, please feel free to ask, especially because it's just us here this evening. So please do just let me know. If you don't want to open your mic, don't worry, just pop it into the chat. Otherwise, I just wanted to cover the last question that pertains to the Keynesian model that we were covering last week, just so that it's, nice and clear. Okay,
I'm not
perfect.
sure if my mic is working.
Yes, working perfectly.
Oh, okay, because I'm having struggles with my laptop. I'm so sorry.
Oh, goodness. Okay, how's the assignment coming along?
It's going well. It's going well. I've finished, I think, the essay, which was like the first question. I'm just trying to do the graph, for the question two. That's all I'm left with.
Oh, perfect. That's brilliant, hon. I'm so happy to hear it.
It's only
Because
like
obviously we've all had the laptop issues. So
it's
submit
only 10
quickly.
marks. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to like fit everything into 10 marks. Should I just elaborate and put as much information as I can? Because
Yeah. Look, go ahead. I don't want to restrict you too much, especially when you're on a roll, elaborate as much as you want. Okay. So try, the idea is to keep it to sort of a factor mark, but
yeah.
if you want, then that's perfect. Then don't even worry about how long it takes you to say what you want to say. You just go ahead. And then we tweak as we progress through academia, and so there's nothing to worry about. Okay.
Thanks.
No problem. And then I will also I will like suggest little tweaks as well to your assignment if there's anywhere we can maybe tighten up just for the exams and for like going forward, just for your own personal development. But I won't penalize you for that. I'm very, you know, yeah, no, I'm understanding at least in that perspective. Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
so so in our consumption function, okay, you have only two elements you really need to be concerned about. So we have autonomous consumption and induced consumption. So now if you remember that beautiful graph, okay, so consumption essentially on our aggregate demand function, on our aggregate demand graph, we have aggregate demand and we have income. So obviously, like we said here, our ideal scenario is where we have this perfect alignment. Oh, okay, so that's perfect equilibrium within our economy. In other words, all the money we make, we consume. Now, that is obviously, something that we are told to be wary of, and for good reason. But the idea is that if people are saving money, that you are actually losing money. It's a leakage to the economy. So if people are storing money under their mattresses, it's just not productive money. So we need money to be actively working to grow the economy at all times. Otherwise, we have underperforming or underutilized assets. So when you're looking at the consumption function, the other one that is just on a side, okay, so consumption is also equal to consumption minus savings. Okay, so you'll consume whatever you don't save. Now, obviously, interest rates could sort of fall into that category. So, for the long term, it is important to note that the reason you can actually see what a government is trying to encourage. Are they trying to move us towards a savings environment, where people are saving more money, or are they trying to move us into a consumption environment? Now, because of Keynes, first principle, essentially saying that if you take care of the demand, the supply will take care of itself. So we have to encourage consumption in our economy if we want it to grow. So savings is the enemy of growth, according to Keynes. Okay, now obviously, personally, we can see how that would work, contrary to what he says, but we can still understand what he was saying. Now, autonomous consumption on our aggregate graph looks like this. Okay, so this is C, and we typically put a little cap on the top, okay, just a straight line. So the reason that this is a straight line is because on this income graph, we're trying to say that it doesn't matter whether you make 500 Rand, it doesn't matter if you make if you make 50,000 Rand. Okay, I'm just going to put 50K here. You will still have this level of consumption. Okay, so this is the income in the economy, what people are earning overall. So now, if you are not,
I
this is
actually
what
can't see the graph that you're working on.
you can't see my graph. This is
Mhm.
terrible. Hold on. Let me see here. My Hmm. 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 Goodness, that seems to be going through everything except the one thing I want to go through now. Of course. Start whiteboard. Can you see it now?
It's loading. Yes, now I can
Oh,
see
finally. Okay, brilliant.
it.
Goodness. All right. Goodness. I have to say, I love whiteboard, but it does, cause some problems. Okay. Tech problems are honestly the new. like accepted part of our lives. We're just like, yes, it used to be Wi-Fi dropping and cell phone connections dropping. Now it's
Mhm.
just general
Everything.
tech problems. Exactly. I hear even the new AIs are causing some business problems because they're taking over business processes, but they do things that they're not supposed to do all the time. So
Like
causing
the
some issues
distance.
there.
Mm-hmm.
And to tie it back to economics, a lot of investment spending went into those new AI systems. So if we don't start to see a return on that investment, it could cause problems for these companies down the line. And
Yeah.
surprisingly enough, it will benefit everyone who didn't get very involved in AI. Ah, the irony. It really is the tortoise and the hare, isn't it? Okay, so back to consumption. So consumption function, so autonomous consumption is what you spend irrespective of what you earn. If you made no money at all, you would still spend money in order to survive. Okay, even if it was simply, simple, you're borrowing money, you are using debt, you will find a way to survive, okay? Even if you're not employed. We know, even if we can't fathom it necessarily, we do know that it's possible because 30% unemployment rate in South Africa, those people are still, we're actually expanding our population despite the fact that a third of us are unemployed. So, always interesting decisions. But even if you have no income, you will still spend this autonomous consumption. Now, every time you see any letter like C with a line over it or I with a line over it, it means that it is what you spend irrespective of what you earn in income. Now, then you have your induced consumption. Now, that is what we are all subject to. And induced consumption, pushing the wrong button, there we go. Now, obviously, because we can't start at zero, because nobody consumes nothing, you cannot survive if you do not spend money and consume goods and services. So, we have to assume that there is always going to be a level of autonomous consumption. Then we have induced consumption. Now, that is directly related to the amount of income you have. Okay, so in practical terms, in real life, we call this lifestyle creep. Okay, so what happens is when you're making 500 Rand, somehow you make it through. You may have to survive on just 2-minute noodles, but you survive. But once you start getting to 50,000 Rand a month, that's when things start to get fun. Then you will have cake for breakfast because why not? Everything gets delivered to your house. It's sushi every day. And that is induced consumption. So that increases as people's incomes increase. Now, that is a wonderful thing for the economy because we want people to earn more and spend more so that we are having what we're showing organic growth. Okay, so that is a natural growth in our market, and that's obviously ideally where we want to be. Now, here we have a consumption function that has been given to us where they have provided us with both the autonomous consumption, which is 180 in this case. I'm just going to rewrite it here so that we can work with it. Okay, so 180 in consumption, in autonomous consumption, plus we also in our economy spend 0.75 of our income. So they're telling us a story here. They're saying that if we have no money, we spend 180. If we, as our money starts to increase, so will our spending. Now we can actually track how much of our income we spend. And in this case, it is 75% of everything we own. Okay, so they've given us quite a lot of information by telling us this. Then they said that we also in our economy have planned investment spending, okay, of 260. Now you will also note that investment spending is also not going to be something that rises, okay? What it actually looks like is something like this. Okay, so this is investment spending. It's I with a little cap on the top. Why does it get a cap? Because investment spending is the same throughout the year. We're not concerned with what the company earns, it is about what the individuals earn. Okay, for this portion of macroeconomics. So, investment spending will always be a kind of flat line. That's why it gets no function. It is simply sitting here at 260 million. Okay, that's actually a problem because that means I need to raise this to about here. Okay. Why? Because if this is 260, that makes sense because this one down here is just 180. Okay, so I just want to give you a visual representation of the information they've given us. And then we know that this is the gradient of this slope for the induced consumption function is 0.75. So with every 1 rand your income goes up. You will spend 75 cents. Every 100 rand, you will spend 75 rand. Okay, so this is essentially how your graph is starting to look. Now we know that because we have no government and no foreign sector, we only have these two variables. That is all the consumption we have within our economy. So here, when we said originally that ideally this is where we want to be, where aggregate demand equals aggregate income, we also know that Y is equal to all of these things, or rather, aggregate demand is actually consumption plus investment spending. Okay, because in this scenario, there is no government and no foreign sector. So now all we're going to do is start putting these two formulae together. Okay, so we keep the A equals, but now instead of just giving C, we actually have a formula for that. So we're going to substitute that in for that consumption function. So we're going to put in the 180 plus 0.75 y. Okay, we have to do the substitution. We also know that the I is going to pop in there. So we know that I equals 260. Okay, flat rate. Now, putting it together is relatively simple from there because we're simply taking these two and we're just going to add in our 260. And then we're going to solve for y. Okay, so in this case, just because we can't go very much further, here you're just going to simplify this into giving me a final answer. So here you'll tell me it's 440 plus 0.75 y. Okay, because you're simply adding the like terms together, and that if you gave me that information, I would be able to tell what my aggregate demand function is. So I know that in my economy, we are going to have autonomous consumption on an autonomous investment of 440, let's say 440 Rand, tiny economy, or 440 million makes more sense. And 0.75 of any additional income that we receive. Okay, so now we have our key function. Now, Keynesian economics is all about these formulae and how we manipulate them to get the answers that we need. So now, if we are to try and figure out what that equilibrium level of income is, it means we actually have to solve this specific formula. Okay, so now let's do that. Okay, so now we know that because y equals a, in fact, I'm going to do this on a separate little section here. Let's just move a little bit. There we go. Okay, so because we know that a equals y, okay, we can also say y equals, and then we're going to plug in this formula that we've just worked out. Need it to move so it doesn't overlap. Okay, so we have 440 plus 0.75y. Okay, so now we're going to move things around. So we're going to obviously move the y onto the left-hand side. All the y's are going to be grouped together. And we're going to leave the fixed variables or the 440 on the right-hand side, just like you did in maths. Okay, and of course you know that when we have a term that jumps over the equal sign, that the sign changes. So that plus 7.5 now becomes negative 0.75y, which is still equal to 440. So remember your algebra from either last year or back in the day. Okay, so all we're doing is using basic math to get to the functions that we actually need. So 0.25 is what we're left with here. And we know that equals 440. We can solve that by multiplying by 4 on both sides. Does that make sense?
Can we just divide
Okay,
like
I've got you. Okay, let's go back here. Okay, so these formulas always get us a little bit tricked up. Okay, so all we're doing is substitution. Okay, so in the second part of your question, they ask you one for the formula that you need that sort of shows the growth of the economy or the spending in the economy. So you've done that, okay? All you have to do is just combine those two functions that they've already given you. Remember, I equals 260 is a function on its own. It's just a flat value. So once you have this consolidated aggregate demand function, we still want to equate it back to our income because we need to now know what equilibrium income looks like. And equilibrium income is always going to be this formula, A equals Y. Okay, so now because we know that, we have a value or a formula for A, we're just substituting all over again. Maybe this is a better way for me to represent this.
is A always equals to Y?
Now, sometimes A is either larger or smaller than Y, or sometimes vice versa. But when they ask you for the equilibrium, the consumer equilibrium, or the equilibrium level of income, we are assuming that all of our aggregate spending is being
Equal.
financed through income. Exactly. Okay,
Okay.
so as soon as they ask you, you can make that assumption.
Okay.
Okay, so then all you're doing is substituting that value for A with the formula that you've come up with here. Okay, so you can obviously if you want to write this out even, because I know it can get a little bit complicated trying to do it in Word.
Yeah.
So if you struggle at all, no worries. I'll work around whatever way you can get this through, because it's just a few questions here that really expect a level of maths, knowledge and capabilities to insert into a document, which is a bit mean. Okay, so okay, so here we have our aggregate function, and all we've done is substitute it in. Now we still have, like, this is 1y. You
Yeah.
remember from back in the
Yeah.
day. Okay, so now we've got 1y and we've got 0.75 on the other side. Now, in order to figure out what the value for equilibrium income is. In other words, what is this value for y? We have to simplify this formula. So we've got to work it out. So, you want to push everything with a letter to the left-hand side of the equation. Okay. And to do and to do that, all you're doing is you're doing the same thing to both equations. So what you're really doing in maths terms is you're saying, okay, all I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 0.75 from this side of the equation, and I'm going to do the same thing to this side of the equation. And as long as you're doing the same thing to both sides of the equation, you're not doing anything mathematically dishonest. Okay. So you are well within your rights to do this. So here we have a situation where we've got 1y minus 0.75. Now here it gets tricky because we're actually asking you to do this in maths. So this is what it's obviously showing you. Okay, so you've got a quarter y equals 440 on the other side. Okay, so now your calculator might struggle with this, but you being a smart girl, know okay, that this means that because we know that if you want to get rid of anything in your equation, as long
Mm,
as you do it to the one side and do it to the other side, you're clear. Perfect. So here we've got a quarter, which is just irritating to work with. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply, because obviously a quarter multiplied by
mm,
4 would be 1. So we're going to multiply this side by 4, and because we have to be mathematically honest, we're going to multiply the other side by 4 as well. Okay, so this can look a little bit complicated. Of course, you can jump this step. I know that you understand this level
mm,
of the maths. So you can jump from here to saying, okay, so this equals, oh, sorry, I've done this already. Oh, yeah. So this just equals 440
140. Oh,
multiplied
usually
by
I
4.
just divide by 0.25 on both sides and I calculate.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. You can absolutely do that. Perfectly correct. Because we're essentially doing the same thing anyway. And then we're going to end up with equals. What's it? Forgive my maths. I know it's 17. I think it's 60. I think it's right. Okay. It's one of
Yes,
those evenings. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Anne. Okay, so the maths behind it, even when you encounter it in the exam, just one step at a time. And then like you said, there's always more than one way to skin a cat. So if you do this, divide by 0.25, even better. It's mathematically sound. Perfect. Okay, then I see they get more complicated. Now, the multiplier. The equation for the multiplier is actually very simple. Okay, so allow me to explain. Now, the reason that we love it when everybody spends everything they have is because of the multiplier effect. Okay, so now I want you to think about this in practical terms. Okay, so you as an Emirates student, okay, you come to class and you have, let's say there's 50 people in our class. Okay, so now 50 people are going to be paying a certain amount for, let's just say, okay, we'll pretend you get a discount and you're going to pay 100 Rand for all of your classes for your qualification. Okay, now in order to make this viable, Emirates has to hire 8 lecturers, okay, to take you through. Now, these people all have to earn an income. Okay. Now, in order to administer that, we need to employ about 72 people
What?
Oh yeah, there's a massive increase.
Mhm.
Okay. Why? Because the lecturers are one portion of it, but you need people to support your admin. We have people that have to maintain the faculties. We have people that you need to go to, where you want to scream. You need library services. You need all of these things. You need receptionists, people who can handle phone calls. You have to employ a lot of people. Now, you people, you beautiful students who contribute this amount, now create an entire economy that starts off small and continues to grow. So, your money creates a spiral of more and more economic activity. And every time more people get employed, that circle grows a little bit bigger because now, of course, these people are going to start employing people or they're going to start spending more. Then we're going to necessitate more of these people. By the following year, you guys are going to go up to second year. Okay, now we need double the amount of lecturers. Why? Because you're going to split into different streams. That means that you're going to need even more support. So every time we spend money in our little company economy, it grows a whole section. A bullet points numbering. Oh, sorry, Felicia. I just want to read your message very quickly. Felicia, I would recommend staying away from bullet points in general, especially for essays. No worries. Technical problems seems to be the order of the day. Okay, so I would stay away from bullet points. Um, you can maybe even numbering. I would use headings instead. So say, give me an introduction, and then use the headings to sort of add structure to your writing. The calculations part, yes, no, of course. There you can go ahead. Okay. With calculations, it's no fuss. The only time that bullet points is really a problem is where we want an essay or a longer type question, so maybe something for 10 marks, then we sort of give you points for, the structure of how you eloquently explain, either the graph or explain your point in 10 phrases or less.
Oh, in the
Obvi-
essay, I recall there being like we had to calculate opportunity cost. I calculated in the essay. Is that okay?
Yes, no, it's no problem because it is put in as part of your essay.
Yes.
Please feel free. No problem at all. Because they do ask you to calculate it and then interpret the data. So like I said, you want to try and look for about 20 points there. You've got 5 points so you've got 4 points to play with. So go ahead and you can give me some, you know, there I'm not going to fuss about bullet points. Just be careful that it doesn't look, you know, you know what we're trying to avoid, guys. It's the AI, that dreaded word. So, um, pop it through, make sure it doesn't look like AI, just generally speaking. I'm not looking out for that too carefully. I just want to know that you understand the work. Okay. Just and obviously that, like things, so the funny thing is things like spelling mistakes nowadays or saying wheel, um, using contractions, things that AIs don't do really show, that you understand something because we can see that it was your work, so just some thoughts. So I'm not looking to criticize your academic writing. I will give you pointers, but yes, AIs are quite, boring. Goodness, guys, it's just ugh. They just say nothing interesting. Anyway, okay, so have some fun within those areas. I'm not looking to penalize you. But especially for the essay, they do give you points for structure. So you don't want to lean too heavily on the bullet points, is all I'm basically trying to say. Okay. Now, as we were saying, we do have the multiplier effect. Okay, so we experience this all the time, and of course, it is exactly what we want to happen. Now, we calculate the multiplier using this very simple formula, and it is 1 over 1 minus MPC. Now, your MPC is your marginal propensity to consume. Okay. Consume. Forgive me. I forgot how to spell for a second. Okay, so your marginal propensity to consume. That is that 0.75 number we were looking at here. Okay, so it is the portion of your salary that you are induced to consume. So that 0.75 is the value of your induced consumption per rand spent. So your MPC is, if you look at it personally, if I were to give you 1,000 rand now, just as a congratulations, think about how much of that money you would spend. Okay. If you, especially using 1,000 rand, if you would spend 800 rand, okay, so let's actually write this down so that we can reference it later. So if I gave you 1,000 rand, okay, and you would spend 800, that means your MPC is 0.8. You would spend, in other words, you would spend 80% of the new money you received. Okay, so MPC is all about creating this multiplier effect. Now, this very simple formula is how the government keeps track of how positive we feel about the economic situation of the time. Okay, because obviously people save when they're scared and they spend when they're positive. And because we understand this beautiful formula, we know that we want people to consume and not to save because saving is a leakage to the economy. And the thing about saving is when we have unproductive money, it creates the same cycle but in the opposite direction. In other words, when you are like when we were concerned during the pandemic, people started saving. But if it continues, people feel worse, they start saving more, and then they create more economic depression. So you can either spiral up in a good direction. So, in other words, we get more students. That means more lecturers are employed, which means we expand the facilities and we create a bigger company and we grow organically. Same thing happens in a country. But if people stop coming because they don't want to spend, don't want to spend the money or don't see the value in it, then that 50 starts dropping in the opposite direction and we start going down to 10 students. Then we're like, okay, maybe we don't need like all of these lecturers. Maybe we only need 2 lecturers. And so your economy starts to shrink. So if you don't spend, you can't grow, essentially. And that is the importance of this beautiful formula here, and which we call the multiplier. Now you are asked, forgive me, I just want to make sure I get the wording correct. I think you are asked to calculate the multiplier. Okay, simplest maths you'll ever do. So here, all we're going to do is we're going to substitute in the values we know. The only tricky thing here is they just want to make sure that you understand that MPC is that 0.75. It is that portion of the induced formula calculation, that's 0.75. So here, all you have to do is say 1 divided by, in brackets, 1 minus 0.75. Don't we love it when they make it easy? Let me just move this up so it's clearer to you guys. Okay. They're very kind. They're clearly, look, when you are looking at, when you're doing multiplier calculations, they can typically be quite nice about it. They're not trying to trick you necessarily, sometimes. So when that happens, at least you have the advantage of having simpler numbers. Okay, so this, for example, would be divided by, we've already done this calculation, 0.25. Okay, so we know that the multiplier in this case is 4. Okay, because 0.25 goes into 1 4 times. So now you know that your multiplier is 4. Now, what that is essentially telling you is that for every rand spent, it is going to multiply in the economy by 4 times. Okay, so more money becomes available, more people start spending, the more people get employed, everything gets better. Okay, so they also said that there was an increase in investment and a change in the MPC. So they gave us new values. Okay, so now they're trying to establish, do you understand what happens to the multiplier? Now, obviously, you want a high multiplier because it means that your money is very effective in the economy. If you've got a low multiplier, for example, if you are Nicole, I see you getting the right answers. I'm loving that.
What's
Okay.
the highest like number you can get for the multiplier?
That is a very good question. Let me see if I can just get a real world number here. Because the thing is, what's the highest real world multiplier based on MPC in the world? Let's see how clever this AI is. Okay, well, I might have to rely on AI. Bing so rarely does the job. Okay, so if a government spends 100 million, the multiplier is 5. The increase in national income can be. That's not giving me the. Oh, goodness. I wonder, what if I asked who has the highest multiplier? Because there are some fascinating cases. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yes, I know. This is the problem with using Bing. So unreliable. Can't answer a simple question. Let's see, Copilot. Oh, okay. So in theory, the lower income countries often have higher NPCs. So countries that Oh, of course. Okay, so people will save less in lower income countries in general. And in high income countries, you generally have lower NPCs due to savings and taxes. There is no official highest multiplier in the world. Let's see. Huh. I suppose it's because it varies. But the basically think of it instead of like Gini coefficient is something that they track on a regular basis. MPC is something, or the multiplier is more something that you deal with within your economy. So it's more like a background calculation than something that we reference regularly. I've never actually heard any analysts talk about our MPC. But what you need to, the idea is this, okay? So if we are to spend, if our multiplier is 4, and government somehow convinces our investment companies to increase, okay, so we're currently sitting at 100 million, okay, in investment. If they spend that 100 million, because our multiplier is 4, that means that our economy has the potential to grow by 400 million. So whatever your MPC is, it's more about how it relates to your income than it is. So, we're more concerned about the income measurement than we are about the we're more concerned about the income measurement than we are about the long-term predictions of the markets. So this is what the IMF would look at, and sort of, to contribute to their own understanding and policy decisions, but not really something that regularly gets published, for example. Felicia, I will absolutely do that. Also, I think if you go to the chat, as soon as we close off this meeting, you should be able to download the recap. Okay, so that you have access to it, the recording immediately, because I've got to go through YouTube, upload it there, and then try and put it onto Arc, which sometimes takes a little bit of time. Really? Okay. But and if you have any problems, I will keep my phone close to me. So just let me know and I'll see if I can, get it to you any faster. But yeah, just try that recap for me. I can even share it with you straight after this, but in the chat, generally it pops up and then you can download from there. Okay, so what does your graph look like? If you want, you can draw it somewhere. I think you do. You should have access to this chart. I mean, to this whiteboard. So feel free to like draw your graph if you want me to just take a look at that. Okay, please feel free. Okay, so now we get told that we have updated aggregate spending functions. So that means that we had an MPC or a multiplier of 4. Now they've changed our conditions again. And they're saying, okay, now we've increased investment to 320 from 260. Is that all we did? Oh, and we had an increase in NPC. Okay, so that means our consumption function has changed. So we're still using, even our autonomous spending. Is our autonomous spending still the same? Yes, it is. Okay, so our autonomous spending has remained the same, but we are now spending more of our money. Okay, in other words, our economy is doing worse. Okay, we're spending more, saving less. So in this economy, we are now going to do the exact same thing that we did before. So we're simply going to do this. Okay, I'm actually going to take a copy of this so you guys can see how similar it is. Okay, so here we have it. So we're going to do the exact same procedure. We have A, okay, in this case, yes, okay, and we're going to say equals to 180 plus 0.85 y, and then we've also got to add the same 320 investment amount. Okay, then we're going to simplify this. Obviously, this is y. Then we're going to simplify this by putting all of our factors in the right side. Goodness, I keep still aggregate spending, obviously, because it's looking at investment and consumption. So here, our aggregate spending is simply okay. Now, the first thing we'll want to know is what does your new consumption function look like? Okay. Oh, that's how my graph looks. Let me see here. Demand and supply. Let me just see. The graph. Oh, okay, I see. Hold on. This is okay, so that is from question. That's an earlier question. That looks like question two, sharp increase in tourists visiting the country. As a result, foreigners in large amounts into rands. Are you saying that there was an increase in supply of the dollar? That's correct. No increase in demand for the rand or for the dollar anyway. Yeah. That's perfect. Okay. Okay, Felicia, that graph looks great. That's absolutely perfect. I can see it's related to question two. I see everything I need to see there. Okay, you've shown the relevant shift in the graph. You've stated the currency and then a scenario of your own. Okay, so there, yeah, that's absolutely perfect. You've nailed it. Okay, you've got everything I would ask for there. You can even, you've shown this, you can, the only thing I could think of, you could maybe show an arrow there, a shift here, just to show that the price has gone down and the quantity that is supplied has gone to the right. But goodness gracious, yeah. Okay, so maybe just. I'm really just trying to add here. Okay, but without it, you would hardly be wrong. Just some additional information just to show, you've done so beautifully here. I'm sure your graph already includes all of these things, but just because, this is quite a graph question for 10 marks, rather add as much detail as possible. Okay, so just those labeling on the graph, on the axes, and then the arrow shifts, beautifully done. Okay, other words, honestly, which graph is this on the whiteboard? Oh, sorry. Okay, so this is the graph specifically related to the Keynesian function. So don't worry. Oh, is that why you were concerned about the recording? Okay, don't worry. This is about the... Sorry, Han. I'm so sorry. Okay, so this is about this relates to question, what's that, six, right at the bottom. And it's just an explanation. You are not required to draw this graph yet. I just wanted to explain a little bit why there is a difference in how we describe the consumption function versus the investment spending. So we say investment spending doesn't change, no worries. So we say the investment spending doesn't change over the course of the year. So it is one value on a flat line. Then you've got the, autonomous consumption part, which is just the 180 straight line again. And then I was showing that this line over here is the colorful one is the induced consumption. So that's why this graph is slightly different, or why we're essentially just doing a graphical representation of the answers you were giving in calculation format. Okay, but don't worry, I'm so sorry to have scared you. That was not my intention. Okay. Okay, so here we go. Okay, just the last little section. Okay, so now we have our final. Okay, so they've given us the new equilibrium, or we've given them the new aggregate spending function, and then they ask us to work out the new multiplier. Now, you can already see that the multiplier, the MPC, has increased. Now, if your MPC, your marginal propensity to consume, increases, your multiplier will increase too. Okay, so they work together. Obviously, if you spend more of your money, more money gets made by the economy. That's essentially all we're saying. So again, we're applying exactly the same formula we did over here. And we're just going to say 1 over 1. I'll put it in brackets just to make it clearer. 1 minus and our new 0.85 MPC. Okay, so when we work this out, we know it's 1 minus 0.15, and we know that's equal to 6.67, something around there. Okay, so at that rate, we can see that the increased investment spending has led to, or the higher investment autonomous spending. Okay, so in other words, the flat line has now gone up. And the higher MPC, which other words that higher leads to a higher multiplier effect. So that's why that graph was there. See, it is simply looking at just a way to explain that in an ideal world, we want everyone to spend all the money that they make because then we grow organically. But we know that's not reasonable. So if you are to increase your spending, you also increase your growth rate. Because as your aggregate spending increases, so does your income. Why do we know that, or what is that thanks to? The multiplier effect. So why, when government wants to make you feel good about the economy, do they talk about how much money they're investing? Because they know that in people's minds, they're thinking, okay, if the government is investing 100 million, that's going to create maybe 50,000 jobs. Those people will all have an income. They'll all be spending money. All of those people are going to be, spending that new money in the economy. That's going to create whole new demand, and that's going to create new reasons for additional production to be done, more suppliers to enter the market, and for our economy to grow. Okay, so now at our new equilibrium level, so then finally they ask you to please work out the new equilibrium level of income. We've already done that once, so we know that all we have to do is take our new equation and solve it. Okay, we have the formula for the aggregate demand. So in an equilibrium scenario, we are counting on the fact that your income is equal to your aggregate spending. So we substitute that A with a Y to figure out your equilibrium income. Then you can see we've got to do the same mathematical thing, and we've got to move that 0.85 to the left-hand side of the graph, and we're going to end up with 0.15y equals to 500. It is 500, am I correct? Yes, okay. So then, okay, as Nicole very brilliantly pointed out, okay, an easy way to deal with this is to multiply or divide by 0.15 on both sides, okay? If you do that, you're left with y on this side and 500 divided by 0.15. You are right, that is a far more elegant solution. Well done, hun. Okay. And then, okay, obviously the answer to that is like 3.33333. I'm gonna say it anyway. 3.3333 million.
Okay, what if I get a negative number on
What a
this?
neg-
Is it possible to ever get like a negative number
That would
for
imply negative income. That would
um
be bad. Oh, did you maybe when you jumped the 0.85 over the equation, did you make
a
oh,
mistake here?
let's see, yeah, because that would just be
Negative 3.32.
would be 1 minus 0.85 to make me check quickly. Okay, yes. Okay, that is right. Okay, so that's way too low. Hold on. I've put that point in the wrong place. That should be like 3 trillion. That because it's 1,000 million, so it's at least a billion. There we go. 0.33. Okay, so what we have learned is increased. It essentially, I don't even know if they ask you to explain. Well, no, not really. But just so that you guys understand, what you've proven here is that when you increase investment, okay, so here, like we have increased it from 160 or 260 of investment, now we move it up to 320. Just that 60 million increase, coupled with a 0.1 or 10% increase in your MPC, has a very big impact on your economy. Okay, so the multiplier effect is what we're essentially looking at. See, look here, we had an economy at our previous, when we were previously looking at this, our economy maxed out at 1760. All the way down here, we've nearly doubled it by simply increasing our investment spending by 60 and by increasing our marginal propensity to consume by 10%. So, you want people to spend in your economy. You want investments to be flowing in because it's good for growth in your economy. And then, of course, they do ask you for the adjustment back to the equilibrium. So, if your planned aggregate spending exceeds your actual income, firms experience unplanned inventory declines. Production will increase, but, and obviously, um, to satisfy this reduction in inventory. It is good in the short run to have a reduction in inventory, but in the long run, what you really want is production to step up because that creates jobs because more people have to be employed to increase production. So income rises. And then if your planned spending is less than your income, oh, well, then in that case, that's when we get increases in inventory. So, for example, think of just give you one COVID example. Okay, so during the toilet paper phase, okay, when we were all panicking, that's when our planned aggregate spending exceeded our income. No one cared. We just wanted to have it in our house. Okay, then later on, when we realized we didn't actually need that much, okay, then our planned spending was less than our income, which means that we started accumulating inventories. Businesses like Nike couldn't sell their new sneakers. So firms start cutting production, income falls. So it's all about you're trying to make it so that aggregate spending equals your aggregate income as closely as possible so that you can maintain equilibrium. Obviously, convincing people to spend their money is a difficult thing to do, especially when they are scared about what's happening in the economy. I just want to give you guys here just a okay, so by the time we were done with our calculations, we had only these two factors. So our initial income or aggregate income for our economy was 1760. After we made just those two changes, we go up to 33. So you see, just a 10% increase in people's willingness to spend can have a massive effect on how your economy grows, which is why when you look at the like GDP figures, you'll always see that there are like a great GDP growth rate is like 6%. That's what we used to achieve back in the day. Now we sit on like 0.5 to 2, 3%. Because if investors, if companies, if even consumers who invest, if we don't feel comfortable, that MPC stays low and we start holding our money and our investment, that autonomous investment starts to reduce. So we end up in a situation where our economy is shrinking. We need people to feel confident, start spending in order to increase our multiplier and increase the growth in our economy. Guys, I don't know if you have any other questions. If there's anything I haven't answered, please feel free to email me. I will try and get back to you guys as quickly as possible. I'm also going to see if I can share. Um, okay, well, you guys should have access immediately to the whiteboard. And then as soon as I leave this, I will download the video and try and get it uploaded onto YouTube as quickly as possible. And then I will share the link on Arc. But ladies, thank you so much for joining me this evening. If there are no other questions, please have a wonderful evening. All the best with your submission tomorrow. If you have any issues, please let me know. I will be sitting with bated breath.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for joining me, both of you. Thanks, Felicia. Have a lovely evening, ladies.
You too.
And bye.
Bye.